us since then. So between the two of us, hopefully we have some insights and some points that we can, or experiences we can share with you that's useful and interesting. And really, the idea for this session, which is the second session of two, we ran one of these Q&A sessions last week with some of your. Let me just turn that off. With some of your colleagues, and Eva, just to check that's on speaker view as well.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, not yet. So if you could just look at that, please. Yeah, so the idea behind this Q&A session was we were sitting there as a firm at one of our weekly meetings, thinking, what can we do in this really difficult period? And there's the obvious health-related issues that have flowed from the pandemic, and we've been, very supportive of that and hugely grateful, as all of us have. And we were trying to think about what else could we be doing, and who else might be affected by the pandemic, and then the consequential economic issues that have flown and will flow on from this, with a likely recession coming upon us. And it struck us that actually students who haven't yet been out in the workforce and haven't been through a recession before — I know none of us have been through this type of pandemic situation before, but even just going through an economic recession does create anxiety and concerns and uncertainty. And really, it was with that in mind that we thought, well, why don't we try and set up some sessions online with students who, like all of us, are not having the contact face to face, and be able to share those concerns with mentors or tutors or colleagues, other students at university, and to try and do that through this medium, through a call like this, where you can ask your questions and try and get some answers. And those questions can be anything really. What's it like in a law firm? What tips do you have to get into one? How do I, specialize? What should I be looking out for? Really anything that may be crossing your mind. And we've done a few of these sessions with some other colleges and universities, and we have a strong connection as a firm with Tulane, and obviously Tulane's one of, if not the leading, maritime school, the department there, and so there's a lot of Tulane grads who have gone into the maritime industry. As a firm, we don't just do maritime; we also do a lot of commercial work as well, and this is open to really any law students at the university. So I've had a number of roles over the years in big law firms and corporations and small outfits, and setting up our own. So so that's a bit of the introduction. And if you'd like to ask some questions, feel free. And Eva can say a few words about herself as well as we're going.
Yeah. Do you want to mention the virtual work experience?
Oh, yes. Thank you for the reminder, Eva. One practical offer, I suppose, that has kind of flowed on from these discussions is, well, how, as a student, how could we get some insight into what we at Floyd Zadkovich do and what our law firm's about? And we've kind of developed a package where we're offering virtual work placements. There'll be a selection process, and we may ask for just a short piece on why you'd like to be involved and undertake that type of experience. But we've developed it with the current situation in mind, and for students who are interested in what an international law firm does and not able to travel easily to London or to New York for that kind of experience, that is something that we will be rolling out over the next couple of months. So if that's of interest to you, please do get in touch with Eva or myself after the session. So with that said, does anyone have a question?
I'm sure. I have a question about whether you predict that the maritime kind of legal market will contract as a result of the pandemic, or do you feel like the work will be fairly steady? And how might a student interested in pursuing a career in that field, how might they prepare or, kind of sift through curricular offerings now to be more competitive to, face whatever the market's going to be?
Thank you for that question. I think it's quite an astute one. Yeah, it's the short answer is it's difficult to read in the medium to long term. I can certainly answer what it's like at the moment and what I think it will be like for the foreseeable. Um, since the pandemic arose and parties and companies have been trying to deal with that, there has been a slight increase, I suppose, in inquiries and issues flowing on from dealing with the immediate consequences. So in maritime law, that involves uh, vessels that might be delayed at ports. It could be that factories are no longer working, that there are quarantine periods or impositions in place in different parts of the world. That then creates a number of contractual issues like force majeure and delays and demurrage and all of that. So in the immediate reaction or the immediate effect of this pandemic has created a number of issues which clients have been concerned about and have required legal services on. So if anything, there has been a slight increase in work on that immediate side of things. There has, though, unlike, I suppose, other economic recessions, and this is unique in a way in that it's been health related as its cause, but often in other economic recessions, we see very quick and drastic movement towards securing assets and ensuring that your contractual position is tight and taking steps to that effect. This situation, at least in the early few weeks and months, I think has been defined by a lot of cooperation, and commercial parties have really been trying to find a way where both sides may have to wear some costs or some delays, but let's maintain the relationship. This is not because any one side has overextended or has done the wrong thing, so to speak. Contractually, this is really out of everyone's hands. So let's try and find a solution. With that said, I think, and we are starting to see this, that the economic reality is such that companies have to protect their positions. And whilst there may be very strong commercial relationships there, at some point, companies have to actually take a position, and they do have to arrest ships, or they do have to seize cargo or attach cargo and take stronger positions. We have already seen a number of restructurings and bankruptcies in the maritime and commodities and other related sectors, logistics and what have you. So that kind of work, I think, will increase as well as we go on. And I would expect that if I'm just looking at maritime law and based on experience having gone through economic recessions previously, I suspect for the next 6 months to a year, there will be a steady flow of work in that area. How things look longer term or medium to longer term it's harder to say. It's really difficult to know whether it's going to be the so-called second wave with the pandemic. Are we going to go back down into lockdown periods? Is there going to be an infrastructure boom where China has just announced that it's going to be investing a lot in a new infrastructure plan out there, which of course will create a huge demand for bulk materials, and a large part of the shipping industry is based on that. Whereas on the flip side, perhaps retail and the movement of some goods might have stemmed somewhat. So on the liner trade, there could well be lower volumes for a period of time. And then on other parts of maritime law, like in cruise ships, that whole industry has just been devastated by the pandemic, and navigating that is not going to be easy. So a mixed bag there, I think, from from the business of a law firm. And I can understand as a student, while you're interested in understanding that from a jobs prospects perspective, I think maritime law is probably one of the more steady areas to be looking at.
I would add a few things there. I'm not sure, are you a 1 or 2 or just graduate 3L?
I'm a rising 2L, so I just finished my first year.
Got it. Okay, you're through the worst part. But essentially, I understand that it's worrisome, because you might be worried that you're ending up in a job market where people are not trying to hire. They're trying to keep on what they have as best as they can, and they're just not looking to hire. And I think, and this is easier said than done, however, I think you're on a great path, is making personal connections. You have to kind of be in the forefront of people's minds, and when the opportunity does arise where someone is in the fortunate position that they're doing really well and they're looking for someone to hire, that they'll think of you. And I think doing these kinds of Zoom calls, unfortunately, you're not going to meet up with people for coffee as much, or drop by an office to introduce yourself. I think these kinds of Zoom calls are essential, of continuing to put your name out there, kind of feel the market, how people are doing. That way you can structure your outreach, and you can get a feel of whether or not the maritime sector, or maybe a different sector, is better for you. So it's all about personal relationships, especially now. I think that people are very willing to help out, because there are a lot of graduates that are now in positions where they're starting to be able to hire or have a say in the hiring process that went through the 2008 crisis. So they know what that's like. But yeah, I would say that it's really important to be passionate about what you're doing. So if you're very passionate about maritime law or any other law, I would not, throw that passion out the window just because you think, oh my God, it's commodities, it's trading. I see people going bankrupt left and right. There's no way I'm getting a job in this industry. I definitely wouldn't advise that. You have time. Keep doing what you're doing, and make sure that you contact people that you think are interesting. Take advantage of these kinds of calls, and you'll be fine. It'll work out. That's the scary thing. That's the one thing you have to remember. It only takes one company to hire you, even though you end up contacting a lot. Just remember, it only takes one. You only need one job. And it'll be fine. So just focus on your studies, and make sure that you try and figure out, at least weed out a couple of areas that you're not interested in, and that should be the first step, I think. Hope that helps. I don't know if there are any other questions. Otherwise, I'll give it a little bit of background about myself. Maybe that'll trigger some questions. So my name's Eva. I'm originally from Germany. I came to the United States for undergrad in 2010, and I've been stuck in the US ever since. I guess it's my home of choice now. But one of the things that I really enjoy about maritime industry, and I think it was ultimately the reason why I chose to practice in it, is that it's a super versatile industry. It's so international. You're dealing with people all over the place, all over the world, the weirdest locations, crazy time zones, good and bad, I guess. But there's just so much to it. And people forget how many commodities are still shipped by sea, especially right now with, a lot of, otherwise it would be by plane. A lot of the planes are down or not flying. So shipments by sea are becoming even more important again. But it really is the commercial backbone for a lot that's going on, and you see that even more now than ever, I think. And I agree with Luke. We've been very busy because there are a lot of novel questions that are being asked that are very interesting. It's a time where people start reflecting and really looking into what they're doing and if there's a way to streamline things or make them more effective. It also is a great magnifier, which I've been using a lot, of all of the problems that we're having within the industry that need to be figured out. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So there's definitely, I predict some sort of shift of just people trying to become more efficient across the board. Because it really does matter. But yeah, I really enjoy the industry. And I think I found a home in the sense that there are people from all over the world working in it. And so you don't feel like the odd one out ever, which is really nice. And not all legal industries are that way, or areas. So any questions?
So, Eva, I have a question. You just mentioned that this pandemic is kind of a magnifier of problems that already existed in the industry. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more, if there's like problems you have in mind specifically? I know for me, some of my background in like social research has been on environmental regulations in the shipping industry and how that poses a lot of challenges, and that it's obviously an ongoing issue that's come up in terms of pandemic response, more broadly, that environmental concerns are kind of coming to the surface in a different context. So just wondering if that's happening in the shipping industry, and what other existing issues are kind of being brought front and center.
Yeah, of course. So when it comes to the environment, shipping in an environment, I think is a very interesting topic. It's actually marine plastic specifically I spoke on at one of the MLA conventions last October. And yeah, it's a super trendy topic, of course. And yes, you're right. It's coming up in all shapes and forms across the board in the industry of, governments relaxing certain regulations for the benefit of certain industries, because it's kind of we have to make this work. Let's forget about other things that make it harder to make it work. But yeah, I wouldn't say that specifically environmental issues and the shipping industry I have within the past 2 months, and Luke, if you've experienced anything on that topic, I don't think there's been much on that right now, or we haven't had any clients asking about it. What I'm specifically thinking about when I say it's a great magnifier is like Luke mentioned before, people start really counting their pennies in situations like this. There are certain times where, it's always a balance of, is my commercial relationship worth this fight? Is my, in the long run, am I going to just pay a little bit more now and suck it up, so to speak, for the benefit of this very useful and long-term commercial relationship? When people are worried about whether or not opposing parties can pay, people start paying more attention to, the payments being made. What is the most efficient? What does my contract look like with the other party? Are there certain clauses that I've never had to look at, and all of a sudden they're becoming relevant because this pandemic is kind of shifting the focus, or shifting the disputes from something very common of, there's a dispute between how much money I owe you for X or Y and how much time, I can discount for something because of a certain situation. All of a sudden I'm talking about, well, you're completely refusing to deliver goods to a certain area of the world. Well, is that a breach of contract, or is there a reason within the contract or a clause in the contract that covers that? And when there are these novel disputes or problems, people have to start looking at their contracts anew, so to speak. So instead of, just assuming that certain clauses are in there because I've been in there, but I haven't used them in 20 years, all of a sudden I have to rely on this clause that I haven't looked at. And maybe it's not so good. Maybe it's not as beneficial. Maybe I want to redraft something. So yeah, so I would say it's a magnifier in that sense, that they're just new problems or questions coming up that maybe make you look at standard contracts from a different perspective. Luke, do you have anything to add?
Oh, I think that was a pretty good answer, to be honest. Yeah, look, I think the environmental aspects, honestly, it's a tricky one at this very moment. There has been a lot of movement in the industry generally, and in recent times, to take steps to improve the environmental footprint of shipping and moving goods around the world. Eva touched on plastics regulation, and that's one aspect. Eva's, as she said, she presented on this at the MLA and has had a number of sessions with our clients on it as well. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to follow up with her, after the call. But there are other movements within the industry. There's been quite a major regulation that's affected the whole industry. You probably may well have heard of it, IMO 2020, which was all about the low sulfur in the marine fuels. And that has changed the landscape of marine fuels drastically at a considerable cost, it must be said, for ship owners and participants in the market to go through that transition, a very important one and certainly needed. And that was really going to be one of the big ticket in shipping, one of the big ticket items to deal with this year, IMO 2020. It was 2 or 3 years of lead up work in how to transition that. And then 2 months into the year, the pandemic hits. And so that hasn't actually been, there are still issues associated with that transition, but that hasn't been the major issue that our clients have been dealing with this year. So I think the point is that a lot has been done, more will need to be done and must be done, and not just in shipping, but in lots of different industries. That all said, where the environment ranks right at the moment, it's a really tricky one to answer, because in some ways I suspect this pandemic has been good for the environment. I know in the major cities, at least, with not as many cars on the roads, the pollution levels have been really low. But at the same time, there's also been a very obvious economic impact from the lockdown period, and how that all plays out politically. It's, I think, going to be a question of watch this space. So that's kind of, I think, what I would say on the environmental aspects. As for Eva's point about shining a spotlight on issues, that's also, I think, a good point in the sense that as Eva said, every dollar, every penny really counts at the moment. And it's not just about the money. It's also about how to handle this from a relationship perspective. And it's a really layered issue to consider, because you're not just trying to work out how to deal with that relationship now, but you're also trying to work out how's the relationship play out long term. You're putting that against the actual operational and commercial demands of your business right now and the economic realities, and it requires a lot of difficult decisions and nuanced handling. So from a lawyer's perspective, when we are dealing with these types of issues in maritime law, and I know in other areas of law as well, this is as important. But in maritime law, a lot of the issues you're dealing with are happening in real time. You actually have a ship sitting off a port, let's say Italy, when the lockdown first hit there, with crew and cargo on board that needs to be discharged. Some of that cargo may be essential cargo, some of it may not. And that's happening. That issue is happening out in real time. And then the parties that are involved in that issue are looking at the contracts to see, well, who wears the delays, who's responsible for this, who's responsible for mitigation and for for those other duties, who has to take steps, how do we deal with it operationally and then commercially. And so from a lawyer's perspective, one of the aspects of this area of law that I really enjoy is you're not just looking at a black and white legal issue in isolation. Often you're looking at it in a commercial context, and that commercial context isn't just winning or losing on the case. It's often reputation, relationship based, and these other factors come into it. And it's not an obvious kind of aspect to practicing law, I think, before you get into the industry, but it's a really important one once you are. I think. Did you have any follow-ups on that? Oh, good.
No, I think we have some questions, right? In the chat. I think we can take two of them together. One of them being, if you're networking wise, if students are uncomfortable reaching out to law firms who have not posted an open position, what kind of advice would you give? And second of all, what's the importance of LinkedIn pages if students are trying to establish a professional network?
Okay. It's interesting, the first question about how to start the networking process, and how to make contacts with law firms and how to get that all started, because that is a question that appeared not just in the last session that we had with Tulane last week, but it has appeared in other Q&As we've had with other colleges. And I think it's such an important one and a scary one before you've started it. One of the first things I would say about networking and getting in touch with law firms is that I expect for most of you, you have already started your networking process. You just may not even realize you've started it. Your cohort at university and the people that you have interacted with, and the friendships you've made, or the contacts you've formed, events you may have gone to along the way, that is the beginnings of a network that's going to some of it last, for many years into your career. And the skills that you have learned, which you will have started for a lot of you, in making connections, speaking with lecturers, approaching other students, working together, helping someone out, sharing a post, all these types of things, that's the beginnings of networking. It may not be as obvious, but it is. And if you can carry that mindset and approach through into the workplace and into developing work networking, it will become easier over time. As for approaching law firms, I kind of call that the barrier between university and the workplace or the workforce, or the divide. When you're at university, it feels like a really big divide, or a really big barrier. How do I get into that? How do I make contact with a law firm? How do I get them to take me seriously? There's that overwhelm kind of feeling. It just seems too big. How do I get started? I haven't even had responses to my applications. I'm not, and so all of this, there's this uncertainty that comes with that whole process, which then creates, I think, at least a perception of a big divide. I would encourage you to try and make contacts with law firms. One of the good ways and easiest ways in this day and age to do that is to set up a LinkedIn page. If you haven't already, I would highly recommend that every one of you do. It's going to become just an essential part of networking, no matter what industry you move into, whether it's in the NGO space, private practice, in-house. You're just going to find that whatever stakeholders that you are dealing with, or colleagues that you have, or committees you want to form, or associations you want to join, those are primarily going to be run through, at the moment it's LinkedIn, but it could well be other social media or media as you go on. So number one, yes, definitely set up a LinkedIn page. The next question is what to do with it once you've set it up. And it does require a little bit of thinking and a little bit of an analysis as to how that medium, LinkedIn, is different to other social, how it's different to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. They are all different platforms, different audiences, different ways of communicating. And so it is important to give some thought to how you communicate on LinkedIn. It's changing as a platform as well. And as you interact with it and use it more and more, that will become more obvious. But to begin with, you want to have a professional page. It's much more of an industry professional medium. And when you're there as a student, no one's expecting you to be sharing huge experiences or this and that, but you can get started, and you can, in different ways, start to interact with, whether it's law firms or whoever you want to interact with. You can start by just interacting with your colleagues. So if your other students post something, or they're interested in something, you can like that. You can comment on it. You can start an online conversation about it. You can do that with posts that law firms make. Law firms make posts almost daily these days. I know that we do. And the biggest firms out there are probably 3 or 4 a day, depending on the areas that they're working in. And by absorbing that content, following it, liking it, commenting on it, you start to get a feel for different firms and how they engage with their audience and their clients, and you get a taste for, I think a little taste anyway, for their culture. And so by starting that process, you are starting to get a feel for law firms. That's tying in networking and LinkedIn together. That's just one element of it. You can start to do articles yourself. All of you will be doing case reviews, or standing up in class talking about a case at some point in time. All of that you're doing now, there's no reason at all that you could not start a podcast on a topic of law that you're interested in, or a series of case notes, or live stream some videos, and do what we're doing right here and start talking to some of your students about a topic and share it. And all of this will just start to build up. It doesn't have to be a grand thing to begin with. You can do an article every second month or something, but it starts that process. And then as you become more confident in doing it, and that just comes from time, I can assure you. If you're game and want to go back and start looking at some of the first videos I put up on our YouTube channel, then I don't know whether I've come a long way since then, but I certainly feel like I have. It just comes from, it's like the snowball effect. And then the last point I would say is when we get back to a position where you can actually meet people face to face, and we have conferences and all of that, and let's hope that's not too far off into the future. But when that comes around again, I would encourage all of you to get involved in conferences, association meetings, seminars that are being held in the industry, and on that. And this is really my final salvo on this point, because I feel like this is a really big mental kind of block from being a student to getting into the workforce. And I'm really passionate about trying to encourage you to get through that, is that actually most people in the industry, I can at least speak for my industry, and I'm sure it's the same in others, are welcoming. They really are. 9 times out of 10, if you approach someone, no matter how senior they are, for some guidance, you send them an email, and give it some thought. You want to be, like I said, be following a law firm for 2 or 3 months. Work out that there's a senior associate at a law firm that's just had a great result on a case because they've published an article on a case they've just won, and write something thoughtful to them about that case and say, I was really interested in that point of law. Would you happen to have 15 minutes, half an hour, some point to kind of have a conversation with me about how you got to where you are? I'm interested in your firm. I've been following you for a while. I reckon you'll get a lot of positives on that. And if you don't, and they're just too busy, it's not personal. It's just move on to the next option. And so the big, put it this way, if anyone wrote to me like that, I might be busy at that point in time, and it might take me a while to get it back in the inbox because there's a lot going on. But I will try to find a time to encourage that person, and I know I'm not alone in that.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with all of what Luke said, and for me, it's been 2 years now since I had to do the job search, and it's daunting. And the whole idea of one must network, the word network, just, I hated it because it sounds so insincere, unsincere. Because in my mind, I'm talking to people because I want something from them. And they're going to see right through me, and they were not going to give me the time of day. And who am I to even, bother these people? They're super busy. They're super important. Why do I even bother? And being on the other side of it for 2 years now, it's just not true at all. Everyone knows, everyone remembers being in that position. Everyone remembers feeling awkward about networking and contacting people out of the blue. And people are welcoming, like Luke said, especially the maritime industry. And I'm still breaking into the maritime industry. So when I go, for example, like I spoke at the MLA event, and that was my first MLA, and I went all by myself. And this industry is quite old. A lot of people know each other, have known each other for decades sometimes. And it's you're breaking into this club, and you just feel horrible because you don't know anyone, and you're just kind of standing around. And but just by showing up, people are so welcome. They see you, they're like, hey, you look new, just because you're young. What's your deal? What are you working on? They're very friendly. They want to get to know you. They want to help you out. Generally, people want to help you out. Generally, people want to talk about their experiences, first of all. If you get a lawyer to talk about their experience, it'll, that's 20 minutes covered in any conversation. So
It's getting them to stop for a moment. That's the tricky bit.
To actually get your questions in is what's hard. But yeah, don't feel like there's this great divide, because there isn't. Because people will remember this process, and people are gonna generally be welcoming. And when they don't respond, respond like Luke said, it is not personal, and you keep on going to the next one. And like I said before, it really just takes one job. It just takes that one person to listen to you, to take an interest in you, and to advocate for you during the hiring process. So yeah, unfortunately, it is a numbers game, which is a horrible phrase. And LinkedIn really helps. We are quite active on LinkedIn as a firm, and I have friends from Tulane who I haven't spoken to since graduation. And when I do, they tell me that they feel like they know exactly what's going on in my life because I'm constantly on their LinkedIn. And it doesn't take much, to be honest. You know, I post an article here and there. I like an article here and there. And and it's a great thing about LinkedIn too, once you kind of figure out a few companies or people that are working in an area that you're interested in, it'll sort articles and documents and videos and all of that by your interests. So once you kind of break into an industry, your LinkedIn will do the rest for you. It'll suggest people that you should connect with. It'll suggest articles you should read, and just pressing a like and, you know, responding something that's super interesting, or congratulations and this and that, it makes such a huge difference. LinkedIn really rewards that kind of even minimal engagement, really. And having and taking the time, and I think LinkedIn now rates how good and or complete your LinkedIn profile is. So it also help you complete it. That is essential. Not having a LinkedIn profile is kind of odd, especially in our generation, but having a LinkedIn profile with an internship that you did in high school, that being your most recent entry or edit to it, is horrible, because it just shows that you're not really sincere about putting yourself out there. And it shows that you're not aware what kind of social profile you have out there. And that is also really important for firms, because they want to come across a certain way, and then once you become part of that firm, the way that you present yourself to the community is also a reflection on that firm. So you need to show that you're sincere about and serious about your job search, because that's a reflection on how serious you'll take your job as well. And so take the time, have people read through it, go to your friend's LinkedIn and look through it, because there are always little mistakes, and it's hard sometimes when you're actually the administrator of an account, to really see how it looks to the other side. I know there's a setting view that you can change to look at it, but sometimes you just go to your friends' LinkedIn accounts and check it out and say, hey, you know, you haven't updated XYZ. It looks like you're still working, or you're still clerking for this judge. I didn't think you still are. Can you look at mine? What do you suggest? Compare to other ones. Look at the LinkedIn pages of associates or at firms that you're interested in, and see how they're doing their LinkedIn, because they might have, you know, professional HR assistants in that. So LinkedIn is essential, because that's the first search that you do. It's essentially your CV, and you know how much time you spend on your CV. It should be the same. And anything else that you can do with, you know, videos or articles, that's great, but just spend the extra 30 seconds every day scrolling through LinkedIn and liking an article and commenting under it. That's really, it's gonna be worth it.
Yeah, how the practice of law has changed over the years. I can assure you, when I went to university 20 years ago, I didn't have any of my professors saying, you know what, having a good LinkedIn page is going to be important to practicing law. But, you know, times have changed. This is how we communicate with each other. It's not only how we communicate with each other, of course, but in these times now, you only have to look at how other industries have been affected. And it's such a terrible, devastating time at the moment worldwide. But that said, there are some industries that have had an early take up or adoption of virtual means and means of interacting with their clients and building their business that are benefiting from the working from home and this type of communication. So Zoom as a business, can you imagine how much that's taken off over the last 2 months? Now, that seems like it's out there and it's a different business and what have you, but actually in our business, in the business of law and practicing law, these changes are impacting on how we do things and how we interact with our clients. I have over the last 2 months or so had more Zoom or conference calls through video than I have ever with my clients. I've appeared in court now 3 times at trials for hearings for over Skype for business. That just, go back a few years and that would have been unheard of. I've seen a witness, a client witness, cross-examined over Skype. So this is coming into the practice of law. We've talked a bit about marketing. It's coming into the actual practicing as well. And there are opportunities in all of that if you take the time to understand it, to think carefully about how you can make good use of it. There's another question that's come in on the chat. Are there any maritime non-profit organizations that students should reach out to for unpaid internships? So yes, there are. I don't know whether they would be offering unpaid internships at the moment or not. But there are a number of seafarers-based charities or NGOs, like the Seamen's Church Institute is one of them. Sailors Society. These are all well supported by companies and market participants in shipping, and also by law firms. Those would be 2 that I would reach out to for a starting or a launch pad into trying to find some internships. Now more than ever, I can imagine that they must just need volunteers and help. Can you imagine all the workers on cruise ships that are stuck off ports around the world? That there have been some very difficult situations reported in the news. I only heard of a few of them yesterday. I was reading about this. So really difficult times out there, and I expect that they would welcome more volunteers with open arms. So I'd start at those 2 and perhaps ask them as well. It's one of those things that some charities will know other charities, and they tend to assist each other as well. So that might be a good place to start. And yeah, just through searching, search through Google and try and find some other maritime NGOs. There are a lot out there that you could seek internships at. You could also approach the Coast Guard. They would have a more formal program, I expect. If they have a program. Where that stands at this very moment, I don't know. And then you've asked specifically about nonprofits, but there are also other businesses that are involved in the maritime industry that may be offering unpaid internships as well. And like law firms, for example, they often have pro bono programs, or companies often have CSR programs that they are running, and so it may be possible that your interest could well be on the nonprofit CSR kind of approach, but there may well be businesses that are active in that sector that have quite significant CSR programs, and your interest could well be in that program. And so I wouldn't rule that out either.
Yep. And then Martin Davis, or Professor Davies, also mentioned that generally, I think everyone can see this chat, that where is this? Having a hard time navigating this chat. That the Center funds an intern usually every summer to work on this at the Center of Seafarers' Rights in New York. So that's something to maybe ask Professor Davis if that's what you're interested in. I don't know much about that though. One thing that we didn't properly answer, if a law firm is not actively posting or looking for positions or applications, that does not mean that you should not apply. If you have been following this law firm on LinkedIn or any other way, and you feel passionate and you believe that you would be a great fit for this firm, then you can still apply. Find someone, either an associate or someone in HR, or just, call and ask who best to send some materials to. But there are a lot of firms that don't actively look to hire because they're kind of focusing on if someone comes along that they think is a good fit. And so you need to show them that you're there and that you think you're a good fit. That's the first step. There's no reason not to contact firms at all just because they're not posting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And if I can add, if I was in a law student's position now, and I was thinking about how to get into the industry, I would start to follow them on LinkedIn. I would look at their website. I would look at what bulletins they have. They're producing the publications. I would look at who's the leaders in that firm, in that area. I would then try and establish, if I can, who are the associates that are working in that area. And I would then just make approaches. As I explained before, I would send an email, a thoughtful one, not just here's my CV type email. I'm talking about taking some time to look at what that person has been producing over a month or two, where they're at. What are they working on? Be quite, show some analytical skills. Take the time to really understand what they're doing. And then in your message, overlay your experience, where you're coming from, and ask for some time. And then I would use that as a building block or a stepping stone to then saying, do you know where your department, because firms have programs, but then departments have more specific needs. And so if you're trying to get into a specific department, or it depends on the firm, of course. If it's a firm like us, you'd contact any of us really, if you're interested in our area of law. But if you're trying to get into a mid-tier or large firm, big law scenario, I'd be thinking that they're all going to have their formal programs, of course, and they may be significantly affected at the moment because of what's happened. Particularly those that are corporate based or transactional based. That's going to take a real hit at the moment. But as I said, I would approach them. I would start that conversation. I would get a feel for where they're at, how busy they are, how much capacity they have. Do they see that their group is growing? Do they see an increasing need for work in that area? And then if you can get that conversation, 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is, I then importantly follow up, find something to follow up with them on. And the takeaway from there is that if you can demonstrate to that person that you have an interest in the firm, and they give you some hope, or they say, yeah, you know what, I'll pass on your CV to HR, then you're in a better place. You're in a spot where you've got some type of endorsement, some type of supporter internally putting your CV forward, and position that you want to put that associate in, or that partner in, or that person in that you've approached. You want to put them in the position of saying, look, I was impressed. This person approached me out of the blue. They've been following me, not down the street, but on LinkedIn. And they've demonstrated a real interest in what I'm doing. They're doing this at university. We had a conversation. They were lucid on the phone. I could tell that they were interested in what I was doing. And here's their CV. Can you make sure that they go forward in the next round? That person is going to be in a better position than someone who's an application in a pile of 500. Does it get you the job? I don't know, but it starts the process. And you do this 10 times, 20 times. You go along to association meetings, you go to industry meetings, and a lot of them is going to be on virtual means for the foreseeable. And people will start to know you and say, oh, you're going along to that this year. It'd be great to see you. This may take months to play out, but that all just starts to build and build and build. And before you know it, as I started at the outset, your network that you've got at university, particularly if you've been in a department there that's focused on an area of law, and a lot of them are going to go on to work in that area of law, you're going to see the same people. Like in 3-4 years, you're all going to be associates at different firms, and that network will carry through. You'll be surprised. So stick at it. I really believe firmly that there's going to be opportunity. There will continue to be opportunity in different areas of law. Some areas of law are going to be more affected than others as a result of what's happened with the COVID-19 situation and the likely recession. But have patience. And someone here, I think, has asked a question which relates to that in a way. If you cannot secure a position practicing law after graduation, should I consider accepting another position with a maritime company and working myself up in the company? The short answer is yes. If you are someone who is interested in maritime law and you've decided, you know what, I want to work and service that industry, going and working for a company in that industry, so a maritime company, will only help your knowledge of that industry in the meantime. I would try and get into a role that has some law associated to it or some legal aspect to it, but that's not absolutely necessary. If it was more of an operational role or a commercial role, then that would still have benefit for you. But what you want to be doing is you want to maintain your connection with the law in some way as you're doing that. So whether that's through some further studies, whether it's attending seminars, whether it's writing prolifically, I would make sure that I'm continuing to flex and develop the legal skills and education that you've already got, such that fast forward a year or two after working for a maritime company, as I say, hopefully you've found a way to do a bit of law within that company, which should be possible, even if it's more an operational role or a claims role. If you can, when you're in the company, try and say, look, there's this case that the company's having to deal with. Can I be involved? Can I watch? Can I be on a working brief? Can I see the documents? Get some legal experience. It's almost like an extended legal experience role, as well as all the industry knowledge. So then in a year or two, when you approach a law firm, if you want to go back into practicing law, or you want to move sideways into another maritime company that has an actual legal position open to you, then you're in a good position to try and get that role. So I would say yes. If you have exhausted options in practicing law and you're thinking about what else could I do during a period of time, then working for an actual company is a good idea.
I think we're out of time.
We're out of time. Any more questions?
Thank you so much, Eva and Luke. We really appreciate you doing both of the sessions. It was really helpful.
Thanks
Not
a
at
lot.
all. It's our pleasure. And as we said at the outset, if you have any follow-ups or you have more questions or you want to just ask something in a more private setting, reach out to either of us. Happy to talk. And I think, as I said at the outset, you will be surprised at how many people out there in the industry want to see the next generation do well and are encouraging. So please don't feel shy in making those approaches. I'd really encourage you to do that.